say healthcare.gov will go offline temporarily on a daily basis to fix its ongoing issues.
Robert Gibbs, I want to go back to something that was said before in the Washington Post. It is really stunning that you had the biggest startup ever run by somebody that had never had run a startup before or had business experience before. I mean, looking back, I mean, people are going to be scratching their heads for years going, how did they make this mistake? So how do mistakes like this happen inside the West Wing?
Well, look, I think that's it's a fairly devastating story because it is clear. I think there's one line in there that said no one person sort of had purview over the entire project. Look, I worked very closely with a woman that's mentioned that story, Nancy Ann DeParle, who is fabulous, and she's not a political aide to the president. She was a health care aide. I think part of the problem was Nancy actually got promoted to deputy chief of staff for policy and taken away from the day-to-day of health care. But there's no doubt that whether it's at HHS, CMS, inside of the White House, I mean, the results now after the first month are fairly clear.
Right.
That nobody was in charge of this project full time because, as was mentioned, I think in the lead-in, you've got 6 people that have that signed up on the first day, according to reports. And I do agree with what David Axelrod said in that, you know, cancellations have been exacerbated by the fact that you can't get on the website to find out what the alternative would be. In many cases, you'll qualify for subsidies that for a better health care policy. So it's been exacerbated by the fact that you can't find out what's going on because the website's a disaster.
Robert, you're a communications guy, and you were there. How could the president say, and there's a clip we'll show where he says it many,
times.
I remember
I'm sure you've seen on New York Magazine.
You can keep your plan. When you know that 5% of the people, and 5% is a small, obviously it's a small part of the story, and overall the impact, if you believe in this law, is better than what happens here, but it's millions of people. You know what's going to happen in the press. You know there's going to be hardships for those people. Why would you let your president say that?
Well, look, I don't recall significant discussions around some of the verbiage on this, to be 100% honest with you.
Do you agree it was a wrong move?
Oh, well, certainly. I mean, I don't think anybody dealing with this today finds what was said. Now, I do think some explanation in terms of the fact that policies that were in place at the point in which the president signed them were grandfathered in for this. Insurance companies have then changed those policies, and then they're not in the grandfathered set of insurance policies. So there certainly is some insurance company discussion that has to be had here as to why so many of these policies on the individual market change so quickly. But again, I do think you will have an understanding, and this is why the website is so important and why it has to get fixed sooner rather than later, and that is so many people in this individual market will find a better policy at a better price. They can't see that right now because the website's broken.
So Mike, for every news story that tries, or every person who tries to spin and tries to make this less than it really is, you know, 5%, well, actually it's millions and millions of people. There's a column this morning by Edie Littlefield-Sunby in the Wall Street Journal.
We have that in must-read.
I fought and survived stage 4 gallbladder cancer with a 5-year survival rate of less than 2%. I'm a determined fighter, and I'm extremely lucky, but this luck may have just run out. My affordable, life-saving medical insurance policy has just been canceled, effective December 31st. And she can't keep her doctor. She can't keep her plan. And she can't keep the team together that's kept her alive.
Joe, no matter which number you're going under, whether it's 3.5 million people who have been thrown off their insurance or told they're going to have to find a new doctor, whether it's 5 million, whatever the number is, this is an unmitigated disaster right now for the administration and for the people of this country. That's the larger issue. Robert, my question to you is off the Washington Post piece yesterday. One thing stuck out to me, and that's Larry Summers' name. Larry Summers was an outsider in the very inner circle of that administration. Obviously, most of you had been together since 2007, some of you earlier in running for the Senate, and then running for the presidency. So an outsider, Larry Summers, says, hey, we got to take a look at this because it could get screwed up. So the question is, how insular was that White House, or is that White House now? Who, other than you, and I know you would go into the Oval and give the president bad news, who in that White House would go in and say, Mr. President, this is a mess. We've got to put the brakes on and fix it?
Very good question.
Well, look, I think David Axelrod could do that. I think Rahm Emanuel could do that. But Mike asked me the question as to who would have done it then. And I think, look, I think Larry understood, because he's an enormously bright man, how complex this situation, how complex the rollout was going to be and how complex the procedure it was to set it up. I think, you know, again, reading that story and finding out that, I think, you know, you get into that story, and late last year they realized the exchange wasn't where it needed to be. They were way behind. Contractors weren't doing what they needed to do. There was going to be very little end-to-end testing on the website. That obviously appears to be true. And even the testing that was done.
Robert, why not delay the launch?
Yeah, I don't think, Joe, anybody. It's a good question. I don't know the answer because, again, we're learning all of this stuff sort of after the launch happened. So I don't know the answer.
All right,
Willie, and just to underline one more time that piece that you read, Joe, in the Wall Street Journal. Yes, there are 15% of Americans who are uninsured. This law could be a very good thing for them. 80% employer insurance, they'll be okay. But when I hear this sort of dismissal of the 5% of the people,
that doesn't work.
It's 14 million Americans. So if any percentage of that group is having its insurance canceled and then having to go out and find insurance, which in many cases has higher premiums or higher deductibles, that's a terrible thing. And that's a lot of people. So let's not say it's 5%. It's a tiny sliver.
Those are Americans. It also contradicts what we were told.
Right.
Which is probably more important for that.
Big mistake.
But even as some people admit that it was a contradiction or perhaps a lie, they're saying, yeah, but it's a small sliver of the country. That's a lot of Americans.
That has been the backup.